What's going on? Welcome back, bitch. It's the Mist Podcast with your host, Arrow Mist. I'm sober and I hate it, but we're back. So you're going to see a real clear difference on just how lined in I am and how not lined in I am in whatever way. But today's topic is going to be I really wanted to talk about ego, but I feel like at the same time, because I had this as a topic, was like all the versions of ourselves. So whenever you meet somebody, hell, think of anybody that you know. All you are building of from that person is just a repertoire. You're getting a face of them or faces of them, right? Parts and partitions of this person that you perceive, and then you take your own vision of how you see the person, right? Good example of this is like think of those people that end up like being related to the people that do like really heinous fucked up things, like heinous crimes, or like, you know, the dude that seemed he was perfectly cool, best guy ever type of guy, and then out of nowhere he does anything on the list of, you know, harming another person, and everyone's just like, I never would have thought he would have done. Because you don't know. You do not fully know all of the pieces of the puzzle when it comes to how you're putting together another person. There's always something that can be missing. And I think it's important to talk about all of that because, like, some people start looking at themselves with a particular distinction on different areas of themselves, being like, you know, that's a different me. That's a different me. But it's like, no, all of these places exist within you in the same centralized point, but they're in their own little corners. And, you know, everyone has their own logistical way of connecting the dots of things that's usually going on with them. So I've heard it explained in many different ways. And I usually just continue to tell people it's all you. Everything in there and all that you are is still all you. Nothing is separate. Because if you start separating things away, then I haven't looked into this term too much, let alone anything about it, but people talking about compartmentalizing their emotions. I can only assume what it probably means, but I don't know, so I won't say anything on that. But what I do know is that whenever you start to section yourself off in different areas and give it different distinctions, then you basically get to start setting out a whole different line of excuses instead of doing what you're supposed to with all of the parts of yourself and just keeping a realistic, honest, unfantasized point with if there is any struggle in that area to say, right? Because that's usually what inhibits us from creating our progress forward in some capacity whenever we just aren't being honest with ourselves. So it's like getting through anything as far as the negative aspects of ourselves and our thoughts usually ends up coming down to you having to go in there and be honest and be real. Because if you can't, then you just live in a world of your own negative delusions and your own suffering forever. It's a lot of people don't realize that just is the point where happiness, getting to happiness, or as you would say, peace. I feel like people just want peace more than they want happiness, even across the board. That's still where it's going to stem into. So either way, sectioning parts of yourself off in any way is just not going to be good. It's not going to be good for yourself especially, but sometimes that can be reflective to other people. So, you know, your awareness and your honesty are your keys when it comes to understanding all of oneself. And, you know, they talk a lot about, I'm sure you hear all the time from people or places or on the internet, wherever, it's definitely been said before, that you really start finding yourself, but or becoming a different you as you go on. But it's like you become a constant transfer of energy as you live day to day. And so all you are continuing to do is morph what is already there and what has always been there. And so it's you reconnecting with what you used to disconnect from whenever you are making progress with yourself. And I think that putting any piece of yourself to its own individual status instead of understanding the implications of just it being you, whatever that might be. You know, I think a lot of people just can't come to terms with themselves. They can't come to terms with the truth. And even if they know it's the truth, they don't want to acknowledge that. I've seen this pop up a lot, to be honest. And like, it's even set in my own frame of mind, because there's things that, like, I think it's really scary for some people, honestly, because you are at some point, maybe you've had some process where you have the remorse to yourself, but we all take it as an opportunity to demean ourselves and dig ourselves deeper into the hole that we've dug, that we usually dig with those negative thought processes. So, and I think that's why a lot of people dive to fantasy, to their negative fantasy rather than the truthful negative aspects, is because, like, without guidance, you are going to be smacked in the face with the own realization of the places that you fucked up. And even when you're aware of it, if you're not changing it, then it's a lot of suffering. And I'll tell you that firsthand, because I've been fairly aware of where I'm at with a lot of things. And even now, I am aware of what issues I have, what things I'm still unraveling from all of my own processes, what I'm still trying to implicate into my process to change who I am. And, you know, creating and strengthening, I wouldn't say creating, but strengthening the willpower that I already have in me, as we all have it there. But it's like, when you've been drugged way through the fantasy mud for so long, you fall out the edge. Like, it's hard to come back from that without somebody guiding you half the time. And that's kind of when you see people just get lost for like a long time, because like the parts of themselves that they're still trying to find, they never find. And you're not honest with yourself. If you just, some people just, I feel like, really can't face those repercussions of like, yeah, just, I fucked up. Like, I should have just done this, or I should have been better, or just whatever. But like, you know, they, cause that's when they would use the best opportunity to like destroy themselves. And I feel like that's probably why you see a lot of people not able to make progress, is like, you know, people end up getting to be very soft-hearted, because they don't want to give to other people what has been brought upon them and anything to do with it. And so they present that to people, but then they don't, as most of us that help people do, we tend to not imply to what we know is feasible to other people to ourselves. And even I'm a victim of that, of course. But I continue to make sure that, hey, I got the keys, I know. And having some type of implementation of the things that I give out to people, there still has to be some remnant of it somewhere in my own process. And there is in other areas. But what you'll find is that usually one thing that applies in one area as a process or a perspective applies in fucking all these other areas. But sometimes it's a different way, and there's just like a small, well, just a tiny thing that makes it so much different. And that if you like apply it there, then it's like you're just done. My brain really just works in some weird ass way where I'm like, here's a long list of scenarios and things that you should not use this in. Yeah, I go over that shit without, I don't even know why. Anyway, try not to get too off topic. But man, oh man, you have to be really careful. And I know a lot of people just even and even though I've built my own backbone, it still becomes difficult because like I've had to understand and realize that being a good person in any possible way, being a good person, even for other people, even if you're just like looking out for other people and you just like want the best for other people or whatever, like the only way for everybody to get to the same place, you included, of the place that you want to push other people to be at or to get them to, whether it's being happy or pleased or whatever the hell it is, being upfront, blunt, and forward about your self-worth of what you know you deserve. If you don't uphold those things, then you're just stringing everybody else along in the same world of nothing but pain and hatred and all of the low vibrational stuff, right? If you truly want to be able to give back, to pull people up, to do something, like you have to stand your ground with things. And that's like the only way. But if you can stand your ground and feasibly learn how to do that while just using it as a platform to give people the base perspective they need to change their perception, because sometimes all you need is a small amount of words. So, and some people won't think this deep, but I definitely have, because I want to do the same thing where I want to help everybody, but standing my ground, feasibly giving other people the reality they don't want to hear on their own because of what they're giving me and how they're treating me and how things are going or whatever it is, you end up running down the exact same rabbit hole no matter what you do. So I almost lost my train of thought. All right. So, okay, sorry. I think my internet crashed for a second on my PC. Where was I? Yeah. So if you're going to go about trying to help other people just naturally, if you just have your mindset so stuck on helping others, then understand that you getting to a good place and putting yourself first still does the exact same thing as what you might consider rude or mean to somebody, because you're giving them the opportunity to grow, and that truly is helpful to everyone across the board, than it is to not give them that, because they'll give other people pain. They may never see it, right? And that just is what it is. You've done what you can do. But when you set something in somebody's mind that is literally so breaking on their perspective of reality, kind of like as you would describe psychedelics would do to somebody, right? A lot of people end up experiencing this in their lifetimes at some point, where think about that one thing that just blew your mind, that one thing that changed your perspective on how you looked at an entire thing. In a nutshell, that's technically what psychedelics are doing. But even in real life, as you would say, right, without psychedelics, you experience this exact same thing where something breaks your entire perception on something. You're just like I have my idea of how I think the universe functions, how it works, all the way from parallel worlds to dimensions, all of it. I've thought through to get some type of conclusion, and I always take the assumption that it could be right, it could be wrong. It's like a 50-50, but it's the most logical thing I could come to, right? Even when it comes to that, I always just take that point that like, I hope I'm wrong. I hope it isn't what I think it is. I just really hope it's not. But like, bro, if I lose my train of thought again, I'm gonna be angry. I don't want to go too far off because I just lost it again. I feel like I can keep my train of thought so much better whenever I'm high. I'm not gonna lie. it kind of slows my brain down because like I've jumped topics way too much in this one section, and I've veered way too much already. I'm just all over the place, but it's like because there's so much that ties into like one area. I really need to like make notes or something. Anyway, shit, I'm the only one here. I can do whatever the fuck I want. I'm gonna try to cycle my way back though. Okay. So just understand that lifting yourself up and doing what is necessary for your own growth, even especially in a positive manner, putting that reality in other people's faces can also help uplift them to the same place that you technically want them to go. So not putting up with somebody's bullshit, no matter where it is technically doing them a favor. And anybody else that you would never want to see have pain put on them. But you can't help everybody at the end of the day either. So, but as long as you're putting yourself first and doing what's better for you, then you'll be doing the most that you can do for other people. If it's not anything deeper than like, words. And pretty much all I can give to anybody at this point is I can give you words. I can give you perspective if you want it. That's all I can do. I can tell you some things that might help outside of that, but I ain't a doctor. I just do my research on shit. Do your own research on some stuff. That's usually what I tell people. I'm like, you got to do your research, man. Like, here's what I've looked up. Here's what I know. Some people just can't get by without having references and resources for everything. I'm just like, man, you just got to do your research. But back on topic, all the pieces of you, of us. I dove down that rabbit hole because I feel like it's still important. It's definitely one area of all of the parts of you, and getting a whole collection of it. I try not to go too far, but all the way off the wall. Because I really wanted to get into like the ego and how the ego is built, because it's like there's so many different areas of our existence that exist. And like, they're just all these different neurological processes, right? And everything's built off of something. So it's like, you could honestly wish they do a study over this. Like getting like real info on like how people's experience was and how it shaped them to be this person. I feel like that's one thing. I don't know if it's been studied or not. I need to go look into it. If they've done studying on processes of the brain, right? Because we understand that like your perception of reality is based off of your experiences. And we also know that even with that, due to all of the patternizing a brain can do, that's why you could give a scenario that is practically identical to two different people, and they could come out in two different aspects of how they are as an individual. I usually say it's either they become what they have encountered, they end up becoming a reflection of all of that, or they become the opposite and internalize it and rise up above it. You either rise or you fall with it, right? I wouldn't even say internalize on this side. You either rise or you fall with it. You, from that experience, it either shapes you to be this person, this great person, or it shapes you to be so self-destructive that you can keep nobody around you, or you become an actual perpetrator like the person that had done you wrong in your own previous point of temporal existence. But everyone gets shaped off of things in a whole different way. I really wish there was more science on it, but the understanding that I have on how this functions is that regardless, there's still a base amount of prognoses to your mentality, right? And the ego is probably the most daunting hardship of it all. because without that one particular part of self, life would just be a different bitch with a different set of goals, with a different everything. This life would be so different without ego. And what's ironic is, like, whenever you think about a civilization at one point that advances, right? We just think about a civilization being able to get to like a type 2, type 3, type 4, right? They must be bored, right? But okay, and I'm not going to go too far off the wall with this one. But like, let's say that they're out there. Do they even have ego? Do they have self-identity at that point? Obviously, those are questions that will never may never be answered. But you don't know exactly, in any case, what it is that like lies in that realm of like, where's, you know, you have the you would say advancement of the human species, and like our mentality, psychology, and everything like that also gets to a point too. But I'm like, you know, we think about how restrictive certain aspects of us are now, but we're going to evolve anyway. Eventually there's going to be technology that kind of corrects even then, like the issues with our own mentality and functionality and everything going on in here, right? All these issues, as we would say. So it's like, but what then? You know, especially like let's say you're in a civilization that can cure all diseases and stuff like that. But like, not going to go too far off the wall with this one once again. Probably I'll find most of the cures to current day diseases in nature. You research. That's all I can say. And there, I'm not gonna say anything else on that. But think about a civilization that has it like at the forefront, right? Where like they don't give they would prefer people not to be sick, right? They would prefer people not to be sick at all. And it's at that point where they could just hook you up to a machine and press a button, and you just the best you could be and ever will be, type of thing, right? Just like, and there's nothing wrong with you. So it's like, what then, right? Because this is usually how I look at it whenever I explain, you know, finding the central point within yourself, is that there are these sides of you that you can phase into, like the negative fantasy, the positive fantasy. But the positive fantasy would be the ego, right? Because true positivity technically sits in the middle, which is really interesting. Because like anything that is, there's a difference between being positive and then just being full of yourself, right? Whether that's to yourself or like to other people or whatever. Like, wait, I haven't thought through this, so I'm like, okay, but if that's the case, isn't technically the positive ended side of the fantasy actually just something that ties into the negative? Because the intentions are kind of derived from like a negative connotative, a negative place of gratification. You're trying to gratify yourself in some way, so you kind of just come off like a dick, or you come off rude. But like, because like a true sense of humbleness or peace, or like humbleness and positivity would be at the middle, right? I guess that's where you'd have to say like that. It still technically would all sit in the negative, even the egoism, right? Because that is a part of like, even if you could live in a positive ended side of the egoism, there becomes delusional reality with that. And I think that's a better way to say it. Because that all that negativity is just, it's delusion. It just it's just outright delusion. But so is anything. So is the ego. So that's a better way to go about it. Would be to say it is just it's the fuck. I forgot the word. It's all an illusion. And whenever you don't live in the illusion, then you live in reality. But isn't it weird or ironic that reality is really where the peace or the point of happiness is? Right? Because like with all negativity, that's practically all we're doing is just painting a constant fantasy. Anything egotistical would be fantasy based. But I'm still trying to think of how this meshes with the spiritual understanding of, I guess it just kind of goes deep. That just goes deeper into logic. You know, like, I am made up of the same shit in the universe. We are all energy. Everything in the physical reality is just slowed down for to be perceived. The perception of particles changes what the fuck happens to the particles. Like, so obviously there's something bigger going on here. So, but like, raising through that definitive line is still to say that, like, I think it's really just optimism itself that is like, it's funny how everything can either lean in one way or another, right? Like, you can say optimism, but optimism leans into more like I'm using a positive ended way to look at things. It's almost ironic how everything just seems to function in like a battery, right? You have your positive and your negative, your pros and cons, your bad and good, and there's always the in between. But like, you know, there's always everything in between it. But that kind of, those are all subsidiaries if your base points are just shattered. So when we talk about you phasing out into different places as far as a fantasy, that's pretty much where it is. Any place that seems to exist outside of the realm of anything positive or peaceful is just a fantasy at the end of the day. God, I've really got far off the wall with this one. That might even be a little bit controversial in a sense. I feel like it holds some merit to it though, because if it's that far out, I don't think it's far out to say that like that's pretty much how most of it's built. And if you think of how everyone's built their negativity, they just live in a world of fantasy with how they bring themselves down, or how, you know, anything of that sort, all the aftermath stuff, right? And that's kind of the whole point of why I've tried understanding a lot of these things is like, so sure, so I think the point I was making was that your experiences can build up to make faces of you shape into certain aspects of you, but no one ever truly gets all of you. They don't get all the faces of you unless you let them. And a lot of people are still coming to the point where they're getting back in tuned with themselves. So you're always just rediscovering what was already buried there whenever you are finding yourself, or you are evolving, you're transferring your energy, you are maybe just even evolving to find more energy that you just hadn't tapped into yet in your own accord, whatever it might be. You still end up getting that back to that point where you're like, all right, but once you understand how to interconnect with all parts of you, centralize it into the same neutral point, and you can sit there, and it also helps with building and growing bonds with people and like just getting in tune with yourself. It's good to understand what all is going on and how it all works. And it's just like, sometimes you can't base a bad situation to say that that's somebody's character. You know, there's, Even if we talk about like brain states and like what brain waves you're emitting in specific brain states and how that's affecting your body, like, there's a mode your body sits in for learning. It's like theta. Yeah, it's theta. And there's like different transitional phases even as we grow up, that we end up going through different brain state wave cycles. Like, at this point you existed in this frequency, then you got to this age, you exist in this frequency. You can go look up brain frequency on YouTube and you'll find a video on it. I don't remember it. I didn't look deep enough into all of it because there wasn't even that much information. It's just like one video. It's kind of explaining it. I did some looking into the research of it. It's all there. I didn't memorize the fuck out of it. But the base process of it is very important. Is basically just to say that you can exist as different people in different states of mind, and maybe that's not necessarily like, it can be emotions, it could be like the way you're thinking, it could be a day, like, and sometimes that's why it's good to know who you are, because like if you go off of by everybody else telling you what you are or what you aren't, then you just kind of end up building up the faces of you to be inauthentic, and you kind of get away from your authentic self. And being and living your truest you is what gets you closest to peace, to happiness, to being surrounded by all of the positive things that you want to be surrounded by. Whether it's people, wealth, love, whatever it is, right? And I think with breaking it down, a lot of times just awareness is key. Awareness. You gotta be aware of what's going on. Awareness and honesty. AH. Awareness and honesty. If you can be honest with yourself, shit. It's tough out here, but I believe in you. The dream. God, I feel like I've went way too far off the wall with this one, but I'm gonna keep it just because fuck it. I feel like there a lot of things end up tying into each other, so it's like I could fucking go all over the place with this. That was the other thing I was going to talk about actually here, was what fuels the ego, right? What seems to be stripping people away from understanding that? I think it is just awareness. Because if you're not aware of your actions and the repercussions of your actions and your decisions and like how you're acting to other people, and you just worry only about yourself with no empathy whatsoever, then it's like you're just going to live in the biggest egotistical repertoire you could. And this is going to be a whole interesting topic for some people. Capitalism pretty much is fueled by ego, right? Because if anybody wanted a system that was going to help people, it's not the systems we have now. And capitalism, sure, could maybe have a way that it could work with something like that, but it's like when I think capitalism, I think of the debt system. That's all we're playing is a debt system. Government ain't got no money. They get that fucking money from somebody else. And that's all public info. Like, you can go see who's in the pockets of all of those people, but I digress. Either way, that in itself, even at the forefront, at the top, it's just fueled by pure ego. So how do you rid a world of ego when the system is based on fucking ego? Like, because if there's no status symbols, if there's no money, people don't have anything to be egotistical about anymore, really. Like, it's really ironic how the structure of our entire society literally has built in itself like societal and mental health issues. So fucking ironic. And I know this might hit somebody's ears one day that's just like, well, you can't have this without that. You can't have this without that. And it's just like, listen, every problem you could think of that exists is literally all rooted back into the structure of things. And those structures are implied because of capitalism itself. So you could take a great example out of some ancient civilizations books and do obviously what they couldn't do, but implement a proper system to make sure everybody helps and contributes to society in whatever fashion that may be, and can go about not being absolutely depressed or dealing with any harsh issues, and even having the forefront of conquering those fucking issues across the board. But let alone, the whole point of changing and having a system implied in any area is so that there is no negative, morally negative things happening across the board, right? Nothing. So it's like, if mental illness ends up being derived from trauma because of people's not so good experiences, and people stop having those bad experiences growing up because the people above them understand exactly what to do, how to be, how to raise, whatever, and having no issues, and you basically just, instead of passing down mental illness, you're passing down positive ended things, positive processes, the opposite of what most of us have encountered now. And it becomes a whole different system. Then almost 90% of the issues you could think of that we have right now would literally not even exist. Like, straight, pure. And that's from every standpoint, from health to mental health to crime to how things are working, people's contributions to society, like being involved, suffering, like everything. World hunger, climate, like when everything's working together, but in an actual feasible way that everyone thrives at the same time, you're sitting in a whole different place. I don't see how some people just don't understand that. I think I tried to explain it to somebody once and they're like, no, we can't live without capitalism. And I'm just like, pretty sure you don't have to have money just for the world to function. It's only been around for so long, dude. Like, people used to live like without it, and they did perfectly fine. So like, there could easily be a better way. I think that one thing that has come from it though is like crypto and NFTs. Lawless. But think about how much we actually would have got done if half of what's going on didn't have to be based out of it was purely just about the advancement and not about the monetary aspect of it. If you excluded money and you just and you structured it to where everyone is contributing as it would be, then we would be way farther along. I mean, shit, behind the scenes, they are way farther along. Hell, we literally used the same current system since, was it late 1800s when Tesla created that shit? Like, all of this new age technology has kind of been around. If you look around in patents, you'll find it. That stuff has existed. Having one small upgrade to an iPhone every year is just them fueling capitalism. If we wanted to get somewhere technologically, we would have been way farther beyond half of what the fuck we're dealing with now. There's other things in play. So it's a whole different ball game. Capitalism. Fuck capitalism. That's all I can say. Fuck capitalism. Somebody sample that and put in a song. I'm not going to do it myself, but if I ever get famous and you come back and you listen to this and that happens, put it in a song. Thank you. It's my dying wish. um, I try not to get too far off the whole controversial wall. I just the broad ideas that I have in some aspects, in some areas that should be logical, logistical, and applicable. You know, I'm not sitting here saying that I can just, go restructure the world tomorrow and that everything I have to say matters. Take it all with a grain of salt. It's just an opinion at the end of the day. If you get flustered over an opinion, then I just can't help you because I just don't care. I think through a lot of shit. And I don't come to conclusions just to do it in some lunatic way. So there's usually a reason as to why I've come to that conclusion. I ain't on the bullshit. Oh God. I gotta make sure I tack in the parts of became a lot more than just about the parts of yourself. But I feel like that's kind of the ironic thing, is that the parts of ourselves are so tied into the outside world and just how it's shaped parts of us to be what they are, and what people are struggling with and stuck with for the rest of their existence here because of these other structures in place. And I mean, we could go down a whole fucking rabbit hole practically. But I think in the interest of the listener, it's good to say you need to understand what you're doing that's acting out of your ego, and you need to kill it. Because although it seems like that might be a great positive-ended thing to do, it is not. It is still fantasy. And sitting with a sense of ego kind of strings you back into the same loop. Like, honestly, it just strings you into a fat loop, because the things that you're doing almost still are destructive to oneself. But half the things that people find are positive but also egotistical, or even enacting out of those things that seem positive but are still egotistical, is that you still are running the same route of either self-destructiveness or alternate intentions that aren't for the furtherment of your own peace and happiness. Like something along those lines, and you're just going to end up diving too far out. That's going to be it. And a lot of people have a hard time coming back from that, and it's just like, it's kind of one thing I hate to see, but like, capitalism definitely is like a fuel for a lot of it. And I see that. And so you have to realize how a lot of the things that you're doing, what you're engaging in things for and why. I had to reevaluate why I was in music. I enjoy the music and the art, but I enjoy people a lot too. And doing this, giving advice, giving information, my thoughts, my opinions, even some things that I feel like are very logistical as well, or are factual. I tend to I wake up and I start spitting facts, the facts, you know what I mean? But outside of that, man, the one thing I can say is understand the distinction of all the parts of you are still all you at the same time, and you got to come to terms with all of them, conquer them, get away from your ego. It sits in the same place, and do what you got to do for you at the end of the day. I think the next episode I'm going to talk about developing self-worth. If I run out of like direct mental health topics, then we're gonna start diving very heavily into my, I don't want to say conspiracy shit, but my perspective on the universe and how I understand things and how things make sense to me and how as far as what's going on. So I'll get into that. But I think this covers for the most part what I'm trying to get across to talk about with parts of yourself, understanding them, who you are, not disconnecting yourself from them and thinking they're just a different entity. It is all you. Ego, especially because it's just tied in as one of the major facet parts of ourselves. I might do another part of this where I actually like define out what I think more are all of the versions of us. Because I mean, even as a base point, we could go with the social part of you, the part that you give out to certain people. The ideas that maybe some people might have of you because of all of these other things, like, you know, people you've been around a long time, or the parts of you that we usually, you know, keep to ourselves. Just kind of diving in that whole swoop of like all of the parts, because I need to do a little more research to really have a good grasp on how I want to go about that. There's just so much that I feel like so many different. I feel like there's so many faces of our own selves that we literally just give out to people. Like, whether it's the social you, whether it's the relationship you, whether it's the family you, whether it's the you when you're alone. You know, there's all these, whether it's parts of your own mental existence. You know, just all of the different ways you project your energy to be its own facet, and what it's picked up as by other people, or even what you pick your own self up as in a previous state and how you're perceiving it. So I think I'll deep dive on that at some point. Probably be all the versions of yourself part 2. I got a little. Oh yeah, I'm sorry if I made you on. Got a little too far off topic with this one anyway. I'm sober. I'm all over the place. I just don't even care. But yeah, all right. That's gonna be it for this one. You'll have a good day, night, whatever. Uphold your fucking self-worth. Stop letting people walk all over you, and happiness, peace, baby. That's all I can say. Yeah, I'll see you on the next one. Later.